Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pediatric Summit webcast series. This is part 4 of the 8-part webcast. And happy May, everyone. So it is May, so that means that there is only 5 months left until the Pediatric Summit. Basically, how the webcast works is these are previews of everyone that'll be at the Pediatric Summit. So if you like what you're hearing, we would love to have you. Today, I have the honor of introducing one of my mentors. I have the privilege of working with Dr. Rubin a lot, and he travels all over the world for the ICPA. He teaches at Life University all of the pediatric classes, and he's making a huge impact in Marietta, Georgia with his practice, and I get to see it every day, so it's awesome. Hi, Dr. Rubin, how are you?
Great, Amanda. How are you doing?
Good. We are so glad to have you here today.
Honored.
So today we're going to be discussing polyvagal theory and neuroplasticity. And to start off, I was actually typing polyvagal theory on the YouTube channel that we were about to broadcast, and it said that I spelled the word wrong, and it wasn't even a word. So this is kind of a new theory, a new word that is coming out. So if you could just tell us a little bit about it and what it is, that would be awesome.
Sure. I was first introduced to the polyvagal theory several years ago. I was at an ICPA seminar, and it was the Family Wellness Summit in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, is the first weekend of next March. So make sure you guys all know about that. That's going to be a huge thing. There'll be thousands of people and amazing speakers like it was 3 years ago. And the polyvagal theory, initially, when it was first introduced to us at this summit, it was written by, it's a textbook or a book written by Dr. Stephen Porges, who is a psychologist. And when it was first introduced to us, it kind of threw everything in the loop, because like in school, how many parts to the autonomic nervous system are we taught?
Typically?
Typically.
2.
Right. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, right? That's how we're taught. Well, Dr. Stephen Porges, in all his work with anatomy and psychology, found that there's actually a third autonomic part to the nerve system. And he calls it the polyvagal theory. And what it is instead of there being a balance, like everybody's been taught that there's a balance, like the sympathetics are on and the parasympathetics are lower, and vice versa, it's actually a hierarchy. So that there's a third system that nobody talks about called the social engagement system. And that social engagement system is above these two other systems, above the parasympathetic and sympathetic. So that the parasympathetic is actually the most ancient, evolutionary-wise, the most ancient of all the systems. And that's found in like amphibians and frogs and salamanders and stuff. And then the mammals evolved the sympathetic nerve system when saber-toothed tigers were around, so they could run away from them very quickly or fight them if they have to. But then human beings evolved something different in addition, which is the social engagement system, which allows for connection. So, and if you think about, like, even from my perspective, dealing with so many kids that we have with autism, sensory processing disorder, etc., one of the biggest things that a kid is missing in autism that we first see when they first come into our offices, but we watch change over time, and you've seen this yourself, is these kids who do not have eye contact, cannot look you in the face, cannot communicate, and then after they start getting adjusted, now all of a sudden that social engagement system is back on. Mm-hmm. And that's when I first heard this back several years ago, introduced to us. I was blown away. So the first thing I did, got the book, read the book. I wrote a paper on it. The next 4 autistic kids who came through the office, we measured everything and then wrote a paper on it that's published last year in McCoy's Journal of Pediatric, Maternal, and Family Health. And since then, now I've been using the polyvagal theory very extensively to explain a lot of the success that we get when dealing with special needs kids.
Mm-hmm. So typically you have your sympathetic regions and your parasympathetic regions. How, as a chiropractor, do you reach like this third area that you're discussing?
That's a great question. So, and this was brought up, by Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who was he's the one famous about the whole vaccine thing. He's the one who was talking about the polyvagal theory. The way we as chiropractors reach it is two ways. Indirectly, we can reach it through atlas adjustments, because the vagus nerve travels, right near the atlas, kind of behind the atlas in the cervical spine. But directly, we have the ability to do cranial work on these children. And now we are directly affecting the vagus nerve, which exits from the temporal bones. So we can directly affect the vagus nerve. So for those people who do not do cranial work, you are indirectly working on the vagus nerve kind of style of adjustment. But if you are a chiropractor, especially if you've taken like my class or Dr. Rosen's class or some SOT-based pediatrics or whatever, now you can directly work on the vagus nerve. So what we introduced in my practice several years ago, vagal theory paper that we were writing, is to that I only did cranial work on kids who have nursing problems or colic or reflux or whatever. Now I took that and I introduced that to all our special needs kids as well. Better and quicker results. Mm-hmm. The polyvagal theory became and I've been now Dr. Porges really explaining this in very big, at the Pediatric Summit and at Fall CE. I'm going to be the polyvagal theory in great detail.
Awesome. So what are some of the responses? You talked about eye contact. What are some of the other responses that you're getting from stimulating this in kids on the spectrum?
Yeah, great question, Amanda. So the polyvagal theory states that the vagus nerve to 5 other parts of the system and other systems. So it connects to the eyes. So that's the first thing that we see is these kids improved eye contact. The second thing it connects to is the ears. A lot of these special needs kids, you'll see that they cover their ears because they're so sensitive to noise, or they can't understand. Like they might be able to say words, but you say something to them and they can't figure out what you're saying because that's number 2. Number 3 is it connects to the face. The kids, when they first come into the practice, they're very straight faced. There's not a smile to them, and you can do funny things with them that most kids would kind of laugh, and they're just kind of face. And now we see them smile because it connects to the facial and trigeminal nerves. And then it also connects to the heart and lungs, because a lot of these kids, special needs kids, have a hard time regulating their heart and lungs, so that when you're supposed to, as an example, when you run for something and your heart rate's supposed to speed up and up, a lot of these kids don't have that ability, so they're kind of have this connections with their heart and lungs. So we see all those things change. So these kids get more athletic, able to have more endurance because of that, the eye contact, socialization, vocalization, social features on their face so that they can smile at me. So it's an amazing change that we see with these kids over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I can agree, being in your office, that everything you're saying are changes that you are making, and it's so cool to see these kids go from where they come in and watch them progress as they get healthier and healthier. It's amazing.
It is astonishing. I mean, one little girl I keep on thinking of, you know who it is. When she first came in, she could not even look me in the eyes. She would only talk to her mother and father. She would only use 1 or 2 words. Yesterday, she came in to get adjusted, and this girl was talking up a storm during the entire adjustment. Before the adjustment, she's talking to other people. There was a baby in the office, and she went up to the baby, and she said, "That's a baby. The baby's crying. Why is the baby crying?" And the mom's like, "Oh, she's hungry." And they're having this whole conversation where that was zero possibility. She would have just been like this, with her father or mother, and not even communicating. Yeah. Amazing watching these changes and watching them. Not just with her, but with dozens and dozens of other kids, all on the spectrum in their own different ways.
Yeah. Where do you think where do you think the mishappening, like why are the kids on the spectrum having issues with this?
You know, this is the question for our time. You know, why was autism when I was a kid in the 1960s was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 68. That's astonishing. Understand, important point, Amanda, that autism has always been with us. So autism isn't this new thing, like AIDS is sort of a new thing. Autism has been around for millennia. One of the things I love talking to people about is like, let's say this was, and this whole region of Marietta was all settled by the Cherokee. Who in the Cherokee would have been the person who was autistic in that tribal community? Who was that person? And to think about that, like, who's the person who knew all the medicinal plants? Who's the person who knew where the stars were going to be in the sky? Who's the person who knew what things to eat and what not to eat in the tribal community? That was the medicine man.
Are you saying
right?
that would be
So,
the autistic child?
well, and they became autistic adults, and they were the savants. You know, they're the ones who had this unbelievable memory capacity, and they would preachers. They weren't the hunters who went out there with, you know, the spears and bows and arrows, whatever. They were the people who, like, oh, wise, you know, medicine man. Is this mushroom okay? No, no, no. You can't get the mushroom from there. You have to go, you know, behind that tree and up that mountain and down that hill to find. They knew all this kind of stuff. Autism has been around for millennia. Not that autism is something that is new, crazy, like, where did this come from thing. The thing is, why is there so much of it? Like, if an autistic brain is supposed to be within our community, why is there so much of it? And that's the puzzling thing that, you know, mentors like Dr. Melillo, Dr. Berger, who we're going to see this weekend, you know, are trying to answer. And the big thing that Dr. Melillo talks about is a neurotoxic world. We're living in a toxic to us. It's neurotoxic. It's especially the kids' brains and the growing kids' brains. And with all the have now with the Monsanto-based food and, you know, the cell phones and GPSs and microwaves and Wi-Fi and all this other stuff, that is, all those things are contributing to healthy brain in children than we used to have, you know, years ago.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Awesome. Well, okay, transitioning into neuroplasticity. What is this, and how does this relate to the polyvagal theory? Like, why did we tie these in the same conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this is the latest book I'm reading. I just finished it a little while ago. And it's by Norman Dodge, who is actually he's a psychiatrist and medical doctor. He is one of the pioneers in neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity shows that the book says the brain that can change itself. Neuroplasticity shows that a brain that is a certain way today doesn't have to be that certain way later. Ties in with the polyvagal theory, at least in my head, is that, you know, an autistic child who comes into my office who for 4, 5, 6, 8 years has been doing this kind of stuff and not looking at the eyes and not communicating, that brain can change. So it shows that even though at the moment there is a part of that kid's brain or parts of their brains that is not working at 100%, it doesn't mean that it's off. It doesn't mean that it's broken, it's missing, and that is the prevailing theory that was had for generations on brains. Is when I was in school, we were taught never regenerate. That, you know, when you get to a certain age, that's all the brain cells you'll ever get, and you'll never get any more, and that's not true. And so when we see the kids with autism, when we see the kids with ADHD, when we see you know, people who have strokes, there's always a possibility of neuroplasticity. Certainly, the younger they are, which is why we love taking care of the littlest babies,
Right.
And the littlest, youngest children. because I know that their potential is so high. And we have kids who are in their teens and they have autism. Pattern is so much more embedded in their system, much harder for that to change. Not that it won't or can't. It's just the pattern will take more to kind of scrape away the mask to get to the insides, because there's that famous saying in neurology: nerves that fire together wire together. So and that the problem is that works either direction. So nerves that fire together wire together, you can make a healthier brain, but nerves that fire together that wire together, you can make a really sick brain. But the fact is that you can take that sick brain and turn it into a healthy brain. It just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we put.
What effect are you having on the brain?
Well, Dr. Rubin, when he first came on campus in 2004, one of the things that he said, which I have really embraced, Dr. Rubin for saying that, is we're not, back doctors or spine doctors or bone doctors. We're nerve system doctors. Mm-hmm. Between the adjustments that we do, which help the central nerve system kind of rewire itself, give the kids at home to help them rewire when they're not in the office, and the nutritional suggestions that we give these kids so that they're not polluting themselves with junky food. Those three things it's like fertile ground, right? You try to throw some seeds on some rocks, well, maybe some will grow through the rocks, maybe. Seeds on fertile ground, lush, thick, topsoil, and you water and fertilize and plant it, you're going to get a much better harvest.
Right. So how does this tie into the polyvagal theory, and how are you using these together to kind of describe what you're doing with kids and how you're affecting everything in their body?
Yeah, and here's a really critical thing. Being an ICPA speaker, one of the things that Dr. Jeannie Ohm and Dr. Peter Kevorkian are very careful to make sure that all of us is that we're following a salutogenic model, which is really like it's past wellness. How to optimize performance. That's really what the salutogenic model is, versus a wellness model, which is sort of like staying the same. Salutogenic is like optimizing, which means you're never, or like you can always get healthier, right? So I don't take care of kids with autism. Like that's not my thing. I don't take care of kids with ADHD. I don't take care of ear infections. I don't take care of anything. I just and help fix some faulty neurology. That's all I do. So we don't treat autism, right? We don't treat ADHD. We don't treat, ear infections. We don't treat anything. What we're doing is so that means anybody can get adjusted, which means that anybody can get, if we're following a salutogenic model, that means anybody's brain, anybody's nerve system, anybody's body can do better than it is now, right? That's the key. So doesn't limit us to taking care of only kids with some kind of issues, although I watching those things change. But what's really cool is taking care of all healthy and just watching them stay strong and get stronger. You can never get too healthy. Like there's never a top at health, and that to me is so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I know. A couple of weeks ago, you discussed that concussions have actually linked to all of this, and you've recently read a lot about concussions too. Do you just want to touch on that a little bit and share where you are with that?
This is a new thing that we're kind of just investigating. I can't remember, it was several months ago. In the same day, we had a child, and I mentioned this at the talk at the club last week. In the same day, we had a child, and shortly, that same day, maybe the afternoon, there's a child with autism came in. And I was looking at at the end of the day, looking at the two kids in my mind, saying, not a whole heck of a lot difference in some of their presentations. By concussion, let's make sure we understand this is more like post-concussion syndrome versus the immediate injury, right? Immediate injury needs to be triaged. How are their eyes? How's their verbal? How's their motor? Glasgow Coma scale, those kind of things. immediate, like the kid just had a tennis, injury and someone smashed a rack in someone's head, kind of thing. We're talking about the kid had a concussion several weeks ago. This was gymnastics, but it could be anything, football, hockey, whatever it is. And now that child has come in after the concussion and is not the same kid, is off. And they are very moody and they're very irritable and their eye contact is off. If you look at that child and don't read injury or we're in a car accident and hit, the window or whatever, horrible thing happened, that if you don't know that and you look at the child with autism who has no eye contact and it looks like they're not feeling very well and is not very social and is complaining about this similar kind of things, it almost looks the same, but almost the same. So and now so I'm doing more research and showing that they're believing more and more that autism, sort of brain injury that occurred either in utero or shortly thereafter. So and not in brain injuries the way we speak of like a force is concussed against the head, but a brain injury to some particular part like the cerebellum or the prefrontal cortex. So this is a new thing that I am just now studying, and I intend on, by the time the summit and fall CE come, I intend on being very more to say about that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's a great correlation that I haven't heard before. But if you think about it, it makes sense when kids with concussions come in and they've lost their reflexes and stuff like that, they show similar patterns. Would you use cranial work then on a kid with concussion?
Great question. So one thing that I have found, and this is just me speaking, I have other friends who take care of kids with concussion who might have different opinions, but I have found that traditional adjustments, even activator adjustments for these kids. So in that sense, they are also very much like special needs kids, where we actually start them with tonal-based techniques. We use network-based. A tonal technique would be fabulous because we find that doing more traditional adjustments actually worsen some of their symptoms, especially if they are really into what we would call that post-concussion syndrome kind of thing. So what we've done is backed off with our adjustments to do more. And we do not work on their cranium to start with, because even though, as you're saying, it makes sense to get there, but they're not ready for it. So we kind of wait a bit until their system kind of calms down. And this is what we tell the parents. We're going to do, because a lot of them have already been to chiropractors, or could even be a patient, previously, and they're like, why aren't you doing what you used to do with our son? You always use the activator. And we're like, okay, I get that, but now your son's nervous system has taken some damage, and we have to get it to a certain point where it's ready to accept that kind of adjustment. So that hit has kind of dropped his nerve system or her nerve system down a couple of notches, and we have to bring a couple notches up before we can start doing those regular adjustments again. So, and like I just mentioned, what we'll see with a lot of these kids is kids who've had zero primitive reflexes retained before, because we've measured them before. Let's say they've been a patient and then they have a football injury. Now all of a sudden they have a primitive reflex, or a number of them that are positive. So what it shows is that their brains took an impact and it's almost reverted to more like infantile or younger behavior. So our goal is to increase their behavior, number one, through tonal adjustments and the primitive reflex work. And then when they're ready, then we can get back to more traditional adjusting, working on their cranium, etc.
Yeah. Do you think that along with like the neuroplasticity that we've talked about, that kids that have concussions that aren't seeking chiropractic care after, like, and they get multiple concussions, is there a link there because they keep declining?
I have not studied the multiple concussion syndrome or the second concussion syndrome, but from what I have read, most of the kids who have post-concussion syndrome had mild concussions in the past that either were not reported or not recognized. So in other words, the kid coming into us who's had a concussion 2 weeks ago and is now in post-concussion syndrome and his behavior is off and his grades are down and he can't sleep and he's irritable and that kind of stuff, wasn't his first. It might be the first and the first recognized, but it probably wasn't his first. In that sense, what we're seeing is, these kids can get potentially great benefit, but the kids who are having multiple concussions or having the second concussion syndrome where they get it very soon after their first concussion or their first concussion wasn't healed properly, that's something I have not researched well enough. I'm delving into to find out more.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the work that you do with all your children are great. So anything you can add to that with concussions and everything else will be fabulous, I'm sure.
Well, someone asked me, I was in Vancouver this past weekend ago, and they asked me, something like, why are you so passionate about this work? And what I said to them, and I said this also at the talk last week at the club, delved into this, right? So like I have this book that I just finished, and I now have 5 others that I have on my table reading those, getting ready to read those, and I just found 2 more that library this afternoon. So I just suck it up, and the way that you really fall in love and stay in love, like I've been doing this 26 years. The way you stay in love with this, Amanda, is that when you graduate, right? That's when it all begins. And now the cool thing about it is instead of taking stuff that you have to take, now you start taking stuff you want to take and learn about the things you want to take. So Lisa and I are watching the polyvagal theory. What geeky couple are doing that, right? But we love it. We've got something to talk about. She can use it for her psychology stuff. I can use it for my chiropractic stuff. It works really amazing.
That's awesome. So is there any last bit of advice you want to offer besides what you just said about keep educating yourself and keep reading? Is there anything else you want to say to the students or doctors listening?
Yes, I think the most important thing we need to do, aside from reading and educating ourselves, attending webinars, is we need to have the camaraderie. It really happens at places like it. We need to be at these places so that we can all kind of meet up and see each other and see who's doing what. I'm constantly referring to chiropractors all across the world. And I'd much rather refer to, like when you are off in wherever you happen to end up, I'd rather refer to you because I know you than look up, say, oh, well, this person's in Ohio over there. So I think it's really important for us because we all have a mission and we all have a purpose. And if we don't all get together and hone our skills together, like it's easy for us to say, okay, read the books, go to have the webinars, but that's a solo act. Times where we all get together and hang out and break it down and talk about it. So go to the seminars, the Pediatric Summit, go to the ICPA certification series, go to Monica Berger's stuff, go to Dr. Malillo's stuff, and meeting everybody, and let's try to make a family out of pediatric chiropractic.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. We enjoyed today, and I got so much out of it. I'm sure all the listeners did, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Kind of like Dr. Rubin was saying, come to the Pediatric Summit, meet all these doctors, and hear the latest research and what everyone's working on, and really come together. The Pediatric Summit is October 6th and 7th, and you can buy your tickets at thepediatricsummit.com. Our next speaker, actually Dr. Rubin referred to him a lot, will be Dr. Malillo, and that will be next month. So stay tuned for that, and we will get more on the latest research. Thanks, everyone.